This year is the year from pilot to production, controlled architectures, dedicated teams focused on enablement and organization and management and security.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, Tim Freestone. He is the Chief Strategy Officer at Kiteworks. Tim, thank you very, very much for joining me this early morning for you here on the show. Um, Before we dive into anything, what I do with all my guests, I keep that space for them to introduce themselves, tell us more about you, your background, your journey, and then we start the conversation from there. Just as a teaser to the audience, we're gonna talk, of course, nowadays we're discussing this topic a lot on the show, AI intersection, with how it's changing, the way we need to protect our data, safeguarding, and all these important topics. So without further ado, thank you again, Tim, for being here with me on the show. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mehmet. I appreciate it. Um, yeah, my name is Tim Freestone. As you said, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Kiteworks. I've been with the company just under 5 years. God, it moves fast when you get to this stage of your career, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Before that, I was with a short stint at another cybersecurity company called Contrast, which mainly focused on application security. Was with Fortinet for several years, which many people may know, NetApp, and then about 10 years running my own business, supporting tech and cyber companies around strategy and go to markets and things like that. So I've been doing this now a little over 22 years, which is crazy. But it still seems to be fun. And, with AI coming into the world, I got it reinvigorated. Let's call it that.
Right. It's really crazy because I think I've been in the same time as you, Tim, around, since my college years times when I get the first exposed to the technology world. So yeah, it's crazy times also we are living currently. Um, so I like to start with maybe some market reality with you, Tim. Every executive, technology executive I talk to, whether a CTO, head of department, even like cybersecurity leaders also as well. So we talk about, deploying AI in their organizations. But from what you are seeing, is the enterprise actually ready for what it's building?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on the organization, obviously, the leadership, when they started down the journey. One thing I will tell you is whether they're ready or not, it's getting deployed. There are pockets in every enterprise, and some of those pockets are rather large, of people just using it in uncontrolled manners. It's just something you can't stop. There's too much value in the productivity, especially, I mean, I think like the last 3 months in particular, there's been sort of a tipping point with capabilities, and then along with those capabilities come just sort of the rumor mill abounds on what you can do and how well they work, and people just start using it. So whether enterprises are ready or not, they're being deployed now in an orchestrated, organized manner. I don't see it as much. There's a lot of pilots. We know where everybody's hoping this year is the year from pilot to production, controlled architectures, dedicated teams focused on enablement and organization and management and security. And everyone's getting there. It's just taking a lot long. It's taking a lot longer than the people who are just using it on the ground to do their jobs a little bit better.
Right. And as you said, Tim, it's like the year where we are taking it from the lab to the production, right?
Yeah.
Um, and this year also we are seeing kind of a shift in the paradigm from moving, just as AI as the chatbot or the co-pilot to the AI agent, right? So, and we're talking a lot of AI agents. So what makes an AI agent fundamentally, and I'm talking in the enterprise, of course, different from just deploying a chatbot or maybe a co-pilot?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question, and it depends again who you ask and how deep into the engineering. communities you go with the question. I think I heard Anthropic give a definition a couple weeks ago of what an agent is versus a chatbot. So, and I believe it went something like an agent is AI that uses tools over time. And so if you think about it that way with, chatbots, it's, I have a question, I ask you the question, you give me an answer. Hopefully it's the right one. That's actually gotten a lot better as well. Whereas with an agent, it's not a question, it's an order. Do this for me. And when you ask it to do that, it calls a number of tools. Tools are essentially applications or access points or basically API calls to do some sort of action or retrieve some sort of information and produce some sort of outcome. So that's uh, the general difference. And those have gotten better in the last, again, 3 months. It really has been, this quarter that the functions of agents haven't, they used to just go off the rails. I mean, I've been using, AI in agents since you could basically. And they were really unreliable. And now they've gotten a lot better. You can put guardrails around them and see people are seeing a high level of productivity in their daily life.
Right. So before we go into the guardrails, one thing I want to ask you, Tim, is with the use of AI, and sometimes we see push, sometimes like even someone sitting in the office or like working on a project, they might see all these announcements coming from all the major players in this domain. Oh, like, look, they have released this agent for that, this agent for this. So, like, do you think there are some blind spots here, hidden exposures, kind of a shadow layer that's happening in the enterprise? And how big is that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And it gets back to the point I made earlier about just the general readiness and the organization around deployment. Um, Most employees, and I'll just use, Kiteworks as sort of a litmus test here. Most employees are some degree using the tools. Now
Mhm.
we've done a good job at Kiteworks of deploying systems, using single sign-on, enabling everybody, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that, but most companies have employees, and I think or have employees, or most of them are using some form of AI, whether it's ChatGPT and just a Q&A, all the way up to Claude Code and actually doing work for them. Now, it gets pretty dangerous pretty quickly. My daily use, I would probably say I'm one of the more advanced users just from a productivity standpoint. If you asked me 1 year ago how to log into GitHub and what it does, I would have had no clue. Now I'm in it every day. I had no idea what a terminal was. Now I'm in terminal every day with Claude Code. And, you know, the first couple things I do every day is load terminal, write the words Claude, and then write the words, unfortunately, dangerously skip permissions because I don't want to be bothered while it's doing some sort of a task for me. So I tell that story because I have it fairly well guardrailed, but many other people may not. And with commands like dangerously skip permissions, it dangerously skips permissions. So you combine this, shadow AI, people just using whatever they want, with the capabilities and the ability to drop guardrails if you want through commands, and you have a lot of rogue things in your network doing rogue things with your data.
And this is the biggest challenge, I would say, like, because
Right?
we don't know what people are doing, actually. Like, maybe I'm repeating the same story again. Since, I would say, 6 months, I start to receive calls because people, they know, like, I'm following the trends, I having the podcast, I'm up to date with almost every single tool that's coming up. So people started to ask me, is there a tool where a kind of a data loss prevention, but for AI. And I'm asking, like, what do you mean? He said, like, yeah, like how I can ban people from accessing AI in my organization. I'm asking, of course, I know the reason, like they don't want to share private data with these LLM models. I say, okay, but look, the reality is you can't stop people from doing this because, you know, simply you can just take a photo with your phone, and AI is becoming so good in OCR, like it can detect, the text from the photo, and like like it's up to
Yeah.
the people who are working there. Now, saying that, when and I know, like you've published something recently where you said, AI is being deployed faster than it's being governed. Now, if we think about this, where is the biggest gap right now? Is it like the policy, the tooling, or is it the visibility?
Yeah. So look, the one thing to make clear with cyber, there's always a way. So this idea that you're going to create a, a fully 100% secure environment for anything is inaccurate. And anybody in cyber that's been in cyber long enough knows that. As a matter of fact, you have to operate under the assumption the bad guys are already in. Let's assume breach is what that's referred to as. So I'll start with that and
Mhm.
then say what you're trying to do is reduce risk as much as humanly possible. And with AI, you're essentially looking at a new person that has access to data and can access data way, way faster than a person. So a new actor, if you will. So a lot of the systems or approaches to how you safeguard network, the endpoint, the cloud, the user for the human only world, which is an interesting statement. I can't believe I'm saying, but the in this new AI world, apply conceptually. It's just you have to do it differently. So you need all of these safeguards. You need to control the identity of the agent the same way you control the identity of the person. You need to control the environments they work in. You need to control the endpoints. You need to control the cloud, the network. All of these things need agent native um, security layers in order to reduce risk as much as possible. Now, to get to your question, the answer is all of it, but at the end of the day, and this is kind of a narrative I've had for a while with sort of all cybersecurity, with the exception of sort of sabotage-based cybersecurity, is if you think about it, the whole point is to protect data. That's the point.
Right.
And the cyber industry has spent 50 years protecting the network, protecting the endpoint, protecting the cloud, all this infrastructure security to protect the data. The end game isn't to protect the networks, to protect the network so you can get data protection, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason people have done that, or the reason that's been the strategy, is it's easier to protect those things than every single individual piece of data. Historically, that's been the reason why. That's actually so AI has driven a lot of the challenges, but it's also given us a lot of the tools to bring the cybersecurity down to the data layer. So while governing the infrastructure, governing the agents are important, and you should do it, the most important thing you can do is govern the data and control and protect every individual data point that's regulated or private with data layer controls and data security. And you start to see people or companies doing that more now than they did 20 years ago. Um, Mainly, again, one of the big reasons is AI can enable it, but also this drive because agents are hungry for data
Hmm.
and you really just need to get a handle on that. So it's a long way of answering your question. If I were to prioritize or give guidance for priority, I would say start with the data.
Start with the data. Now, there's another angle for that, Tim, which we started to see a lot. I cover pretty much, like some weekly signals also as well. And for the past, I would say maybe since the beginning of 2026, there's um a common theme about sovereignty, right? And I've seen like you said that AI fundamentally changes the data sovereignty equation. How, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, look, data sovereignty, digital sovereignty, it's all about control. Um, Maintaining control over your assets and ensuring that they are yours, and access to and sharing of all of those assets are highly governed, oftentimes to a regional specificity, right? So, there's a lot coming out recently in France. I saw this morning there's a big push for digital sovereignty, and unfortunately for us here in the States, there's a bit of sentiment about France only, but definitely not American, uh, understandably. But what happens, that's a lot easier to realize in a non-agent world or a non-AI world, because of everything I just mentioned. Proliferating data is can become uncontrolled if you don't have this piece of data, cannot leave France, cannot leave Germany, no matter what. So AI can just take data, move it wherever it wants, send it wherever it wants. And so, now you really need that data layer, policy builders or policy and controls in order to maintain digital and data sovereignty. And you're right, it's very, very big right now. It's obviously in every country in Europe, in the Middle East. It's been in the Middle East for quite a while, but
Right.
a lot into Europe, and even we see our neighbors to the north, Canada, focusing on it a lot more. But in the AI world, it's definitely more difficult to maintain.
Right, but the it's not a surprise to me, but I mean, if we go back, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago when the wave of cloud computing started it and everyone started like to adopt cloud, whether on the infrastructure as a service or SaaS solutions. This
Yeah.
question, fun enough, I used to work for one of the data protection companies back in the days, and when it comes to protecting the cloud, to my surprise, cloud workloads, to my surprise, a lot of people, they didn't know that's their responsibility, for protecting their own data. Now, the reason I'm asking you this follow-up question on the ownership and control, Tim, is with the AI, who controls the data? Of course, we know it should be controlled by the enterprise, but we are hearing about stories where, yeah, so someone says, okay, because it's now, even if you have a local data center, let's assume, and all the hyperscalers, all of them, they have footprint here in the Middle East. Of course, they are in the US, in Europe, everywhere. So let's say the data entered. Is it like, can I claim that as a cloud provider, or the model? Like, let's say it's one of the frontiers AI models, whether OpenAI, Anthropic with the or Google with Gemini and so on. And we're giving data also to these models. So how all this new again paradigm shift affect the discussions around ownership and control of data?
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. Well, it's interesting because it's sort of one of those what's old is new again scenarios. There's a big movement for companies to go on-prem again. Take because of these reasons, take the data out of the cloud, build out your infrastructure, get complete control over it, and manage everything locally. It's actually a pretty big movement right now. I read something recently on stats, but of course, being 8:30 in the morning, I can't remember anything specific right now. But I do know it's a trend, and our customers are talking about it. Now, to your question, there's some level of trust, and some of that trust is contractual. So you can get all of your data into your data center on-prem in your country for digital sovereignty or data sovereignty use cases. But the models are not in your data. You can't take Anthropic's Claude 4.6 and put it in your data center, right?
Mhm.
It's not open weights. It's not open source. And so your data inevitably, if you want to leverage the latest in technology, has to go somewhere else. Um, there are contractual agreements you can get into where the foundational model providers don't look at your data, they don't train on your data. Um, so again, we're back to kind of like, what risk threshold are you willing to take in order to realize the competitive advantage that these can bring to your company? But your data does move if you're going to leverage these. And on the flip side, you can put a model locally. You just don't get it. It's not, they're not even in the same universe as Anthropic or ChatGPT or now Meta. Um, Probably X is going to come out with a new version soon. So the companies that are serious about AI leverage are still using the foundational models to drive their business, and their data is moving. Now, to whether or not you can contractually ensure that the model inference is in a data center that's local to your country or whatever digital sovereignty requirements you have, that I'm not 100% sure on. I'm sure there's some sort of capabilities depending on the uh, size of contract, but you're right. Um, you can't have complete sovereignty and leverage the AI models, the foundational AI models. The data does move.
So if you are sitting with a CTO who have invested, let's say, in NVIDIA stack, a hyperscaler, and some, let's say, Microsoft security tools, so are they covered? They should take action. What would you advise them, Tim?
Are they covered in what sense?
In the sense of security and
I mean,
stack reality.
I don't know. It would be, they would just have to apply all of the measures that I started to talk about in order to reduce risk. No one's covered in terms of full lockdown cyber. It's just not a thing. And anybody leading an IT organization or a security organization operates with that knowledge that I have to assume there's holes and constantly be looking towards reducing the risk of those holes. We haven't even started talking about the new mythos, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, model that's coming out and what that impacts on those. But to the answer, are they covered? It's a huge question, and I'd have to look at every single person who asked that question and assess the risk.
What I find, I don't know if the word funny is the right one here, but it's like mind-boggling to me to think like how the internet pushed us to have this kind of interconnected world, and it sparked the whole cloud computing idea, and how we can like get data centers, enterprise, they can interact with each others. And now with AI, it looks like, to your point about pushing outside of the cloud and going back to on-premise. So
Yeah.
it's kind of contradictory of all what we were trying to do for the past, I don't know, like as I said, 15, 20 years maybe now, with the cloud computing. And because I think for the first time, maybe, of course, we used to know, uh, I'm sure like everyone knows the importance of the data, but like no, not similar to any time before. Yes, so everyone start to understand data is the most important asset, because I can utilize it using a model, I can train on it, I can build agents on it, I can do bunch of things, but I need this to be my data to be protected. Now, um, because you mentioned about these new models, so it looks like we are entering a phase where AI becoming the biggest attack surface in the enterprise. Would you agree on that, Tim?
Yeah,
And
I
what
would.
and what you can tell us about what you're seeing also.
In terms of the new models,
New models and how AI is shaping, these attack surface today.
yeah, I mean, look, you, you sort of have to balance the marketing hype with the real functionality of the new models from Anthropic, and then Spud, I think they call it, from ChatGPT, that's going to come out. There's always a bit of hyperbole for the sake of shareholder value in these things, but you have to treat the hyperbole as fact and true. And I do believe that it would be in better shareholder value terms to release models immediately to stay ahead of your competition, and for for Anthropic to not release it at all to the public and keep it within these 40 or 50 companies. So it means there's something there. And it's funny, I saw when they released it, they noted that it had found something like 1,000 zero-day vulnerabilities.
Hmm.
uh, finding one zero-day vulnerability is quite a big deal. Used to be quite a big deal. And then you would see this stuff, people write about, oh, it wasn't really 1,000, it was 1,000, but they were really old vulnerabilities and it didn't really matter because to find them, all these excuses. And when you look at it, really, there was only 138 zero-day. Like, you could have said Mythos found 138 zero-day vulnerabilities and we'd still have our mind blown, right? So the reality is you know, assuming this stuff is an absolute full fabrication, the models are incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous from a cybersecurity standpoint. And if you can find a vulnerability that's 27 years old that you had to chain together four different vulnerabilities to get to that vulnerability, and it happened automatically and you needed no humans in the loop to do it, that changes the attack surface. It makes every single piece of software essentially vulnerable. And to take the path of let's give these 40 or 50 cybersecurity companies the opportunity to understand it and patch at least what they have and enable them to patch at great scale. Other companies, I think, is a smart move, but we'll see if that's enough, and we'll also see if they actually release it. Now, where it gets really interesting is if you look at China's models, they're on average 7 to 10 months behind the foundation
Hmm.
models capabilities, right? They don't have quite the um, uh, guardian element of what they're doing, at least historically with these models. They just release them. Um, so given that, and given the sort of track record, if it's highly likely that in 7 to 10 months, Quen I think Alibaba is the Quen model, or Kimi or DeepSeek or or all of them will have some sort of comparable model in the wild. That scares me a lot more than the foundational models, because of just that sort of throw it out there and see what happens mentality.
Because it's open source, I think, also, right? Usually they release it in
Yeah.
open source.
But they
Yeah.
it's usually open weights, which is a little bit of a nuance. But the fact of the matter is the public can use it.
And honestly, like we can debate, of course, on this. So what I tell people, especially it was like the 2024, 2025 discussion where we saw like some voices in the industry to slow down on AI, and okay, let's try to get things regulated first. Let's put some legislations and so on. My point of view was we are so late because like once these open source model were in the wild and people start to see like how good they were, I think we were too late for this. And don't forget, like the GPTs, which is from the transforms model, have been in different places for a while also as well. So it's debatable, but yeah, that's really scary. And to your point, yeah, I covered this in one of my posts. Like I think one of the zero day was there for 25 years or so, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really scary, really really scary. Now, if I am a CTO and actually I'm building something, or maybe I'm responsible for an enterprise, and I want to stay ahead. What in practice, how I would do this thing today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes back to what I said earlier. You have to create a cybersecurity plan that's agent native, and you have to start with control of your data. And there are new industries that have popped up around data layer control. There are companies that have been around for 20 plus years, um, Kiteworks being one of them, that has uh, provides data layer controls and what we call a controlled data environment for you to put your regulated data into, to ensure that you have policies at the data layer for humans and agents, to ensure that even if they go off the rails, they can't go off the rails because we have a policy on every single data asset. You combine the controls of data in action, or data in use, and data access and data in use that we provide, and then you compare or combine that with something like a DSPM, a data security posture management tool, that will um, inventory your entire network, your cloud, your endpoints for all of the data, and identify what's private. You combine those two things and you get a really big jump start on ensuring that you have policies and controls at every single individual data asset, so that if agents try to access it, it will understand what the agent identity is, what policy you set for that agent identity, or any agents in that chain, what piece of data they can access, what they can do with it, what they can't do with it. So, that's where I always recommend that people start, and then you need to also layer on agents, guardrails beyond the data. So, what tools can they access as an agent? Which essentially means it's sort of like CASB, um, cloud access security broker 10 years ago, in
Hmm.
terms of, you know, what SaaS products can a human being access, and what levels do they have for that? It's the same thing for agents. So you hit the agent layer, and then you ensure you have all of your appropriate controls at the network, the endpoint, and the cloud. So it's a layered approach, like it always has been. It's just focusing on this new identity, basically.
Great. Um, so as we are coming close to an end, like if we want to have a look on, I know we discussed like different geographies and different regulations, but are you seeing now a divergence in the priorities across decision makers based on where they are located? And I'm talking here, of course, I'm sure like you talk to a lot of executives, not only in the US, so maybe in Europe, in Asia, and so on. Are you seeing different priorities for them? And if you are advising them to refocus on a certain priority, what that would be?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, but that gap is narrowing quickly, but they're just being forced to. Geography to geography, it changes. Certainly, we the customers in the U.S. seem to be more advanced in terms of AI implementation than our customers in Europe. Um, and then when you get into specific industries, the financial services industry is way further ahead than state and local government, right? Different universe of evolution there. So it's geographic, it's industry specific, how far companies are ahead, but the gap is closing very quickly, just being forced to close. And I'm sorry, what was the follow-up question to that? What can I
Like,
recommend?
yeah, so what kind of priorities recommendation usually you are telling, executives you're meeting today?
Yeah, hire specifically for roles, specifically for AI and agent rollout in your company, and AI and agent security in your company. You can convert the interested people in, currently in your organization, if there's an interest there and a capability set that matches those. But you have to create these new positions, and you have to hire for them, and they have to be focused. It can't be somebody's part-time job. And we're seeing a lot more of that. I mean, job descriptions that didn't exist 6 months ago, um, are everywhere now, which is great. But that you got to get people in who know what they're doing, basically.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tim, like final traditional question I ask every guest: where people can get in touch and learn more.
Sure. I mean, Kiteworks is an easy one, just kiteworks.com to learn more about us. And we post a number of blogs every day that follow the industry, what's happening in AI, what's happening in AI, cyber. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. We have a Substack. You just type Kiteworks. Both of those do a great job of keeping people up to date on everything I just talked about. That's about us and what we can provide and our perspective on the industry. And beyond that, go to Spotify and type AI into the podcast and start listening.
Great. I will make sure so people, I like to make people's lives easy. I'm going to put all the links in the show notes so they don't need to type anywhere.
Yeah, really.
Just, go to the links in the resources. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find that in the description. Tim, again, thank you very much for taking, this recording in your early morning and making the time for me and to my audience. Thank you very much again. And this is how I end my episodes. This is for the audience. If you just discovered us, thank you for passing by. Small favor from you, just subscribe and share it with as much people as you can. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for the support. Thank you for taking the podcast again this year 2026 across multiple countries, Apple top 200 podcast charts. So this cannot happen by itself. Just because you are tuning in, you're referring other people in different countries. I can't thank you enough for this. And as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks.